Hey everybody, how are you? We on? It's like the Johnny Carson thing I do. How are you, everybody? I hope you're all doing well on this Thursday evening. Nice day out today. I think it was about 80 after being 100 for a couple of days here in New York. I don't know where you're watching from, but I hope you're cool. I hope you're safe. Make sure you hydrate, which that's a blanket statement because it's summer. So you have to be careful. But thank you so much for coming in, everybody. I really appreciate it. Hey, Ira, how are you? I am off the record, unless anyone watches YouTube or social media. Then I guess I'm not off the record. Joe, how are you? I hope Boston's treating you well, my pal Joe Cotrain. How you doing, man? And I'm still looking to get up to Boston. I swear I'm going to get up there to see you. I promise. So I figured I'd do something different. I thought I'd give you a rundown of the DeMeo crime family. Now, most people say the Soprano crime family. No, 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 no. It's the DeMeo crime family. And we're going to look at some of the members. Okay? So we know as of before the war that killed a few people at the end, the last season, Tony Soprano was the boss. He took over for Jackie Aprile, who took over for DeMeo, old man DeMeo, Hercule DeMeo, I believe, when he went to prison. And Aprile took over at a fairly young age. The consigliere was Silvio Dante. The underboss was Bobby Bacalari toward the end. You had capos, Paulie Gualtieri, Albert Baris, Tony Maffei, possibly, and Patsy Parisi, possibly. It was never really told if they had been promoted. Um, I think so, especially with the deaths. Now, the founder supposedly was Alfano, okay, from the 1900s to the 1950s. Hercule DeMeo from the 50s to 95, which means that he must have done business with Carmine Lupertazzi, who had the family in New York for quite a while. Jackie Aprile Sr. took over from 95 to 98. He was named acting boss when DeMeo, old man DeMeo, went away. Now, interestingly enough, which we can get into, Junior Soprano was passed over. So was Junior Soprano really that respected because he was in his mid-60s? Aprile was probably about a year or two older than Tony, so probably 42. So the young man took over. Maybe DeMeo felt that the mob was heading in a new direction. It is supposed to be real life, which means that John Gotti, by then, was in trouble with the law, but you had some young men. So who knows? They tried to base this. They mentioned John Gotti in one of the episodes, so you know it's real time. Uh, Now, interestingly enough, the former consigliere from 98 to 99 was Mikey Palmisi. Mikey Palmisi, because Junior took over. So Mikey Palmisi really was higher than Tony, even when Tony stapled him. He was higher ranking than Tony. And then Silvio Dante took over when Palmisi was whacked from 99 to 2007 until he was comatose. Now you have quite a few former capos, Larry Barisi, who was in prison, remember house arrest, Ralph Cifaretto, Raymond Curto, Bobby Bacchiaretti, Christopher Maltasante was a captain at one time, Vito Spatafor was a captain, Richie Aprile, Gigi Sestone, who died under Pijaru, as Paulie Walnuts would say, Feach Lamana, Carlo Gervasi, Dicky Maltasante, back in the late 60s, Junior Soprano, Johnny Soprano, and Jimmy Altieri, who was murdered for being a rat. We never really learned if Altieri was really the rat, because Big Pussy was the rat. I guess Altieri was, because I don't think they would have gone that far unless it was paperwork on him. Now, the territory, they had Newark, New Jersey, Bloomfield, Kearney, Fairfield, Caldwell, Long Beach, um, Jersey City, Brooklyn, New York, Miami, and Florida. Now, what were they involved in? Okay, auto theft, bank fraud, bid rigging, bookmaking, building violations, calling card fraud, cement violations, construction violations, um, identity theft, extortion, gambling, labor racketeering, loan sharking, mortgage fraud, truck hijacking, street tax wire fraud, witness tampering, jury tampering, I don't know, robbing a McDonald's. It seems like they did everything. Now they had fronts, which all mafioso. The Bada Bing. Supposedly, Silvio owned that, but I think Tony had a piece of it. Barone Sanitation, Satriel's Pork Store, which Johnny Boy Soprano took over when the guy was indebted to him. And that guy took off, I believe, to Arizona and did very well, or Nevada. And he gave the pork store to Johnny Boy, who he owed money to. Comley Construction, Computers Poultry, Crazy Horse Club, that was Adriana's. The Esplanade Construction, the April Social Club, Zanone Brothers Private Carding, Port Newark Spatafore Brothers Construction. Yes, Vito had a brother. We saw it in one of the episodes when Vito ran away. I don't know if his brother was a wise guy, but I would think he was at least a connected guy. And their allies were the five families, Zuka Kimura family, Russian Mafia, Cuban Mafia, the Atwell Avenue Boys. Who were their rivals? Well, season 6, Leotardo crime family, which pretty much was fully Leotardos. The Black Panthers, Colombians, the Vipers. Remember the Vipers? Kolar organization, the Russians who tried to take over the sanitation routes. That was Chris Moltisanti's first hit, Emil Kolar. The Philadelphia crime family, New England crime family. Okay? So it was formatted maybe 1910, I'm guessing, into the 50s. DeMeo, formed in northern New Jersey by Alfano. Agent Harris says that during World War II, they assisted the military in protecting the Brooklyn Navy Yard. DeMeo is believed to become boss of the family in the 50s. Now, key members from the 50s include Giovanni, Johnny Boy Soprano, who would have been pretty young, right? Corrado, his brother, Johnny Boy got made first. Feach LaMotta, Raymond Buffalo Ray Curto. They called him Buffalo Ray. Paulie Walnuts, Richard Dicky Moltisanti. Dicky's father, Aldo, Hollywood Dick Moltisanti. And the Sopranos were a key faction in the DeMeo crime family. Johnny Boy was one of the most high-profile captains. Very capable guy. Probably would have been the boss. Junior was not really regarded, I don't think, that highly. I think if Johnny Boy Soprano was around at that point, he would have been probably about 67 because he was a couple of years younger than Junior. And I would think he would have taken over the family. He was very well thought of. Junior was his right-hand man pretty much. They had long-standing ties with the 5 New York families. Very interesting. When Johnny Sack wanted Carmine taken out, and he was talking to Tony about it, he says to Tony, I always have the ear of Ginny's brother. Evidently, Ginny's brother was in one of the other families and a high-ranking guy. Now, despite DeMeo's reign as boss, it's mentioned throughout the series that the 2 Soprano brothers unofficially ran North Jersey. Junior on the back of Johnny. Interestingly enough, though, Junior had a lot of support. Obviously, he knew Carmine Lupertazzi for years. And in fact, he says once to Tony, I have a lot of higher people to answer to in New York. More than you, my friend. Evidently, Junior knew a lot of the old timers in New York. Okay? So a lot of people thought Johnny Soprano was the acting street boss, much like his son became acting street boss. Interesting. Now, in 1967, the Newark riots, they broke out in Newark after an African American taxi driver was randomly beaten by the cops. Johnny and Junior were arrested at the amusement park where they held meetings. Junior got off on bail. Johnny was sentenced to 4 years, and that's when Dicky Moltisanti really takes over along with Junior, raising Tony. Hollywood Dick, the family's top earner and close associate, was found dead in one of the businesses after it was burnt down. In reality, he was killed by his son, Dicky, who was angered about the way the father was treating his new wife, Giuseppina Moltisanti. She was from Italy, and he also liked her, I think. Now, he didn't do anything with her, but he liked her. And she liked him, but I think she just liked power. Now, the numbers racket in 1972, Johnny was released from prison. Harold McBrayer, an African-American gangster and former associate, began muscling in on the Newark numbers rackets. That was controlled by Dicky Moltisanti. Moltisanti by now is a captain. So obviously he was made a captain when Johnny Boy was in. So I guess DeMeo. And he was looked at pretty serious. And in fact, when Johnny Boy gets out, he feels that Junior let the neighborhood run down a bit. And he was really mentoring Dicky Moltisanti more. And I think Junior was very jealous of that. And that's why he ultimately killed Dicky Moltisanti. But now, after Harold killed one of Dicky's men, Dicky and his crew broke into the car shop, killed his cousin Cyril as payback. Harold attacked Dicky, Johnny, and Buddha outside of their nightclub. Now, killing Buddha, Dicky and his crew went on the lookout for Harold. Tensions began to boil. That was a tough time, too, late 60s, early 70s. A lot of racial tension. Now, Dicky was constantly undermining Junior. And Johnny kept on comparing his brother to Dicky. So in the Christmas season of that year, you don't know who the hitman was, but Junior sent them. Now, Dicky's crew then merged back with the Soprano crew. No one knew that Junior had ordered the hit on Dicky. So it was a largely accepted rumor that a corrupt cop under orders from probably the African Americans, possibly Jimmy Ruffalo, put the hit on. No one knew it was Junior. Now, 1983. Remember in The Godfather every 10 years or so? Well, this is 10 years later. During the 80s, many of the DeMeo crime family members and associates were arrested. That was the big blow to the family since its formation. Feach Lamanna, a very respected guy. Tony Blundetto, who was an up-and-coming guy in 1984, who were both sentenced to 20 years. Richie Aprile in 89, he got 10 years. These were serious guys that were strong in that family. Now, how does Tony Soprano rise? Well, in 1986, Johnny died of emphysema, his father. Before his death, he requested that his son become a capo of his old crew. So Johnny wanted his son to take over. Now, remember, I had told you, Johnny was kind of looked at as a street boss. I guess he felt his son was capable enough. Tony became a rising star in the family after holding up Feach Lamanna's card game with the future Aprile boss. So he was relatively young, and supposedly he was a captain at 27. Now, Tony's transition into a capo was aided by the loyalty of Soprano soldier Paulie Gualtieri, Silvio Dante, and Big Pussy, who were older than Tony. When the show starts, Tony's about 39. Big Pussy's probably about 45. Silvio's about 48. And Aprile's a couple of years older. So now Aprile ascends to acting boss in 1995 because DeMeo was convicted of a life sentence. Jackie was named the boss of the family. Junior Soprano wasn't happy. He liked him, but was not happy. Felt he was passed over, which he was, because it was assumed that Junior would take over the reins when DeMeo died or went to prison. DeMeo was very impressed with Jackie's leadership abilities. The April crew, along with Tony, who was under Jackie, had been the best run crew, no problems, and the top earning crew. So Jackie becomes the official boss of the family, but he chose to take the title of acting boss out of respect to old man DeMeo. So he did not want to be known as the boss. He was the acting boss, although like Tony was the unofficial boss, but everyone Lightning Rod Jr. But he thought it could fool the feds into thinking that DeMeo was still running things from behind bars, but they probably knew he wasn't. Now in 1999, Civil War. Jackie was diagnosed with stomach cancer, was hospitalized in 98. Tony took over Jackie's responsibilities, and Junior's mad again. Now it's his nephew who he was playing ball with when he was a little kid. Uncle Junior and Tony were at each other's throats because Junior plotted to murder a rival, Little Pussy Malanga, in Malanga's favorite restaurant, which was Vesuvio. And that was owned by, originally, Tony's high school friend Artie's father. Then Artie took it over. Now, in the pilot, Silvio shows up to the pork store. Hey, what are you doing here? He goes there a lot. And then, do you remember your high school friend Artie Bucco? Well, your uncle's looking to do a hit. Now, you would think Tony would have been to Vesuvio's. High school was 20 years ago. So that's wrong. He would have known Artie. He doesn't have to be reminded who he is. Now, Tony foiled the plans by ordering Silvio to set the place ablaze. This way a hit couldn't happen because Tony thought that it would hurt business. So Jackie came back as boss, but he would be hospitalized again. So evidently he was hospitalized in 98, got out, and either it reoccurred or just kept progressing. So Tony's nephew Christopher and his associate Brendan Falone were hijacking trucks from Comley Trucking, a business that paid protection to Junior. Junior's enforcer, which when Junior takes over, officially, supposedly, Mikey becomes the underboss. They killed Brandon, and Russian mobsters hired by Junior performed the mock execution on Christopher because he didn't want to kill Christopher. He was a kid. Jackie dies in September 98, and the tensions between Junior and Tony are really at a high now because it was assumed that they'd both go to war over this. Tony deferred to Junior pretty much after talking to his psychiatrist and Melfi kind of telling him, really giving him advice about his mom, that give them the impression that they are right and they are winning and getting what they want. That's what Tony did. So I wonder if there would have been a war if it wasn't for Dr. Melfi treating Tony. So Tony defers. The DeMeo family was renamed the Soprano family. Even though it was the DeMeo family under Jackie, they rename it. Of course, Junior probably had something to do with that. But he was boss in name only, like I said. Tony controlled the capos in the family. He was the highest earner. And he was a main conduit to the Lupatazzi crime family. He knew Johnny Sack for years. Johnny Sack's probably 8 years older than Tony, as well as 2 other New York families. So Tony is highly regarded. They knew his reputation, very capable, right? Now, tensions flare up between Junior and Tony after Livia Soprano, his mother, revealed that Tony was seeing a shrink, and he was meeting secretly with the capos in the old age home. So in March 99, they tried to take out Tony. Tony managed to escape with an injury to the ear, left one hitman dead. So after the FBI showed Tony that the failed attempt was planned by Junior and his mother pretty much, Tony orders the death of Junior's crew soldier Chucky and consigliere Mikey Palmisi and Capo Philly Parisi. Parisi was with Junior originally, and he was talking about Tony with the mother. Now, Junior Soprano was spared when he was indicted by the government in April '99. So, along with underboss Joseph Beppe Sasso and capo Larry Boy Barisi, and because Tony wanted them to be a lightning rod that took the hits for the family, Tony kept everything copacetic. So Larry Boy Baris, it seems, although he was very friendly with Tony, was with Junior. Interesting, right? Because Baris seemed like he had no use for Junior in some conversations he had. So Tony virtually took over all of Junior's stuff, became the boss of the Soprano crime family, though he officially held the title of underboss and street boss because Junior Soprano still was on that board as the boss. Now, Soprano Junior Soprano's soldiers were Gigi Sistone and Patsy Parisi. Tony brought them over kind of to spy on them. When Junior went away, he grabbed these two guys and they defected over to the Soprano crew, probably knew that crew was done, Junior. Tony named Silvio as the new consigliere. Mikey Palmisi's dead, and I'm sure he wouldn't have done it anyway. And Paulie was promoted to de facto underboss. So Paulie was the underboss. You wouldn't know it, but a capo of his old crew. So he still ran his old crew, and it was renamed the Gualtieri crew. But Paulie was the unofficial underboss. Later on, we kind of surmised Bobby Bacala was the underboss toward the end of the show. Now, although Junior, all his power was taken away while he was under house arrest, he's still officially the boss. And he did act as a mentor to Tony. Tony would ask him. Tony did respect that he had been around a long time. He was just a fossil. He didn't know of logistics and the Esplanade and big business deals, much like Frank Patangeli. I don't have your head for these big deals, but it's a street thing. Probably the same kind of mindset. Junior was diagnosed in October 2000 of stomach cancer. But Tony still punished him through business arrangements, really not giving him all that much. Junior beats the disease in January 2001, was released from house arrest, and then he had a big RICO trial against him. So now, 2000 to 2003, there's a big FBI crackdown investigation after years of investigating Tony, and they actually tried to flip him. You can see it. And they couldn't connect him to anything, really. The closest they came was connecting him to the murder of Matthew Bevilacqua, who shot Chrissy in April 2000. But it was tossed out when an eyewitness retracted his statement after finding out that one of the shooters may have been Tony Soprano. Now, the FBI arrested Tony in around June 2000 when it was discovered that he had been extorting Davey Scatino. He busted out the sporting goods store because Scatino lost over $50,000 in the poker game to him. Tony had been receiving stolen airline tickets, and it was discovered Big Pussy, who was an informant, told him about the airline tickets, and he gave a couple to his mother, Livia, and Livia was stopped at the airport. But it fell through when Big Pussy suddenly disappeared, and Livia died of a stroke. So now they had no one against Tony again. But they kept on building a case against Tony. But the wiretapping of the basement was compromised because of the death of several FBI informants, which were going to corroborate a lot of the things that were said on there. So, they just couldn't get him. Now, in 2003, March or April, the trial against Junior Soprano was a hung jury. They wanted to retry him. So Junior had to stay under house arrest. But because he was so diminished in the position, longtime loyalist Bobby Bacala was promoted to capo of Junior's crew with Tony's okay. So now you have some unrest, and I never believed that Tony could not have thought that Bobby Bacala didn't know the potential hit on him from Junior, and he becomes Tony's underboss. kind of hard to believe. But in the meantime, during the unrest, the Soprano family stayed in a period of transition. Richie Aprile, the older brother of Jackie, taking um, control of the defunct Aprile crew after he was released from prison in August '99. Richie becomes a threat to Tony's power. He crippled Petey Beansy Gator for disobeying Tony, um, repeatedly going against Tony's power. He's selling cocaine on garbage routes, and Tony said no. Richie came to Junior about overthrowing Tony, but Junior decided it would be better off with his nephew. Um, but that's because Aprile couldn't get the blessing of the captains. If he would have, Junior probably would have taken Tony out. So for a second time, he would have tried. But Tony caught wind of the plot through Junior, sets wheels in motion to whack him. But he was spared the trouble because his sister, who was his fiancee by then, killed him. So now Gigi, a Soprano crew soldier, is set to take over Aprile's crew. So now he's going to take over the crew and become a capo. He died of a heart attack on the toilet right before Christmas 2000. Tony has no choice but to install Ralphie Cifaretto as the captain. Big earner. They don't like each other. Tony's had long-time problems with Ralphie, although they both grew up together with Jackie Aprile and Silvio Dante. So obviously they were friends when they were young. So Tony, in a fit of rage, hit Ralphie, punched him after Ralphie kills a bada bing dancer named Tracy because he was coked out of his face. Ralphie also took Jackie Aprile Jr., who Tony tried to take under his wing because he promised his father, I won't let him get involved in anything. They didn't want him involved. Ralphie knew this, still took him under his wing, even went on a collection and had him rough somebody up and threw him some money. Jackie Jr. was an idiot. So they made this kid out to be like an honors student, but he wasn't too bright. So in January 2001, Jackie Jr. holds up a poker game of one of Ralph's associates, Eugene Pontecorvo. If you want to watch Rob Venaro, my friend, I did an interview with him. This is because he heard that Jackie Aprile, his father, and Tony did the same thing to Feech LaManna 20 years previous, and they really got some respect out of it. Not so for this kid. He shot Furio Junta and Christopher Maltasante. He shot at them, actually, in an attempt to emulate his late father. Ralph had to order the hit on Jackie at the hands of his cousin Vito Spatafore. Now, and I didn't even know they were cousins. Now, despite disagreements with Tony, Ralph, again, top earner in the family, lucrative construction deals, the Esplanade construction, HUD scams in Newark. Ralphie was very capable. He also owned a racehorse named Payamai that died in February 2003 due to a stable fire. Ralphie's son was injured in a terrible accident playing bows and arrows with a kid, a friend, a lot of medical bills, and Tony was convinced that Ralph killed in order to pay for the insurance bills. So Tony attacked and killed Ralph. He blamed the disappearance of Ralph on a New York family, especially Johnny Sack, because Sack had a problem with Ralph due to a joke that Ralph made about Ginny Sack, his wife, her weight. So now Vito Spatafore is named captain of the Aprile crew. So you see, before the end of this show, there's a lot going on. There's not much stability in this family. Now, during this time, Tony's trying to groom his cousin, who he calls his nephew. It's his wife's cousin, actually, Christopher, into a leadership role. He wants to be buffered. He wants to give orders to Christopher. He's a young and upcoming made man. he's babied by Tony. The rest of the crew sees it. He was named an acting capo of the Gualtieri crew in September in 22 when Gualtieri in Ohio was charged with a gun charge and spent 6 months. It was later dropped. Patsy Parisi wasn't happy with the choice because he felt he should be named the capo. And Silvio wasn't happy either. He thought that it was nepotism. He wanted to see Patsy be named capo because he knows him for years and his seniority. Christopher has also been named by now, which they know, Tony's successor. But that was compromised when Christopher was found to have a serious heroin problem, and he was sent to rehab. But Christopher cleaned up, proved his loyalty to Tony by giving up his fiancée, Adriana, for execution when it was discovered that she had been cooperating with the FBI, and the whole season we're watching that. As a reward for putting the family above his own fiancée, Chris was made captain of his own crew, which would make sense. You feel he beat his demons. He'd always been loyal to Tony. Now, it was during that period that the working relationship between the Lupertazzi family and the Sopranos became a bit rocky, and it never really was. They had joint control of the Esplanade construction site in Newark. Disagreements over the split money of the Esplanade, the HUD projects. Tony was keeping secrets from the Lupertazzis. That got Johnny Sack mad. So Sack's mad with Ralph Cifaretto because he knows Ralph's keeping the secret as well. And they nearly went to war. Sack and Lupertazzi blamed one another for the conflict. And Lupertazzi reached out to Tony. Although on another occasion, Johnny Sack wanted to take out Carmine because he wasn't making any money due to all the holdups, and Lupertazzi had a lot of money coming from other things. Sack was really held up in that deal. That's where he made a lot of his money. The two families worked things out. So 2004, okay, we're a couple of years before the end of this show. The prison released the class of 2004, Phil Leotardo, Angelo Garpe, Feach Lamanna, Michael Feach Lamanna, Tony Blundetto. And along with the death of Carmine Lupertazzi, that sets off a lot of conflicts. Little Carmine and Johnny Sack went to war over the position, and Johnny Sack was his best man at his wedding. But he says he never liked him, but I think he liked him. The boss of New York, who's going to get it? Tony's dealing with Feach Lamanna, trying to underhand him because he remembers him as a kid. Probably never forgave that he had to give him a pass on that card game because Johnny Boy was very respected. He probably got him off with a bunch of other people. And Tony Blundetto, who was going outside the family and kind of defying Tony a bit. So now, one of the problems was solved when Tony sets up Feach Lamanna to go back to prison after a stolen flat television. A bunch of them were found in his garage by a probation officer, and it was called on the orders of Tony Soprano. Now, was Tony Soprano a rat? It could be made that Tony Soprano's a rat here. Would you rather him kill Feach? I don't think he wanted to, but he's still ratting him out with the police, right? Now, the other problem was complicated because Tony Blundetto kills Lupertazzi associate and Johnny Sack protege, Joseph Peeps Pirelli, in July on the orders of Lupertazzi capo Rusty Milio. He's not made. He feels that Tony's kind of showing him a little upper hand, and he wants to make some money. He was going to be a physical therapist. That falls through. And I always thought that that was a ridiculous choice. I just think that that character was useless. I always thought Buscemi didn't even look like a gangster. And Buscemi was looked at as an up-and-comer, and it doesn't seem that he was capable of that, right? So Russ, because of the consigliere getting killed, Angelo, and because Blundetto was close to him in prison, Blundetto goes crazy. And he kills Leotardo's brother. So he goes off the deep end, and it was an unsanctioned hit. So now threats of war and torture, because if Blundetto was given up, he would have been tortured. Tony was left no choice because his family, the captains thought now it's nepotism. First, he's going through it with Chrissy, and now, it doesn't look good for the other captain. So Tony takes him out with a shotgun so he doesn't get tortured. 2006, that whole season, during his house arrest, Junior is showing signs of dementia. Originally, it was signs of dementia to get him out of prison a couple of years before. Now it's real. It's probably the head injury that exacerbated it after he got hit with a boom mic on the courthouse steps. And he's had some mini strokes, which they find out. So he's increasingly diminished. And he shoots Tony in the abdomen while Tony's taking care of him. He mistakes him for Pussy Malanga, the guy that he wanted to kill, remember? Who had died anyway. The shooting of Tony sets off a media frenzy. The reporters are stalking the Sopranos' house. Outside the hospital, Tony's in a coma. Junior Soprano was arrested and questioned about the shooting. He insisted it had to be self-inflicted. He said, my cousin's a depression case. The captains all cut ties with Junior because you couldn't get to him. And they allow Tony to decide, even while in a coma. They say, wait till he gets better. If he gets better, he'll decide what to do. Junior was judged to be mentally unstable and went to a mental rehabilitation center. Now, with Tony incapacitated, and it looked like 3 or 4 months probably, his consigliere, Silvio Dante, took over as acting boss. Silvio couldn't take the pressure of being boss. Suffered an asthma attack. We never knew he had asthma. That put him in the hospital. Now, after Tony's near-death experience, he awakes from the coma, just in time to settle the dispute, the future of Barone Sanitation with Johnny Sack and Phil Leotardo. The interesting thing is I always thought that he got killed in the last episode because I always thought Meadow was his good luck charm. And it comes in threes, right? She saved him when she was with him when that informant, when they were going to look at colleges, and Tony sees him, and he has a line on Tony, and the daughter doesn't kill Tony. During the coma, he's just about to go into this, I guess it's hell, a building, where Tony Blundetto's trying to take his briefcase ultimately being his life. Didn't know Tony. I guess that's what hell is. You don't know your family. And she's saying, Daddy, don't go. Daddy, don't go. He hears it through the trees, and he wakes up. She saved him the second time. Third time, she's having a hard time parking the car and doesn't quite get in there before the hitman supposedly goes from the bathroom. So I think Tony died. And I think that was third strike. So he gets out in time. Now, with Junior now in a mental hospital and the family cutting all ties with him, Tony is the official boss, both in title and power. During that period, while in jail, Johnny Sack, because of an informant in a Brooklyn crew, he reached out to Tony through Phil Leotardo to whack his insubordinate capo, Rusty Emilio, which was Frankie Valli, in order to prevent a power play with the Lupatazzi family. He's in jail. He's afraid that he's going to lose the family. Tony at first refused, had a change of heart after talking to Johnny Sack at his daughter's wedding. He did it. Tony conducted the execution of Emilio with caution, brought 2 men from Naples to carry out the hit, and his soldier, Eddie Pietro, which killed as well in the car. Now, Johnny Sack pleaded guilty in the RICO trial to lessen his sentence, but he's allocuting, which is a no-no. You're admitting there is such a thing as this thing of ours. Leotardo becomes the boss of the Lupatazzi family. Now, during this season, Vito Spatafor, who's a top earner in the April crew, and he's a cousin-in-law to Phil Leotardo, fled New Jersey, after it was found he was homosexual, they saw him in a club. Carlo Gervasi was named by Tony as a replacement point man for the family's construction interests. Now, Vito spotted for hides in Dartford, New Hampshire for months, probably 6 months. Vito returned to New Jersey, approaching Tony about doing maybe a separate operation in Atlantic City involving prostitution and paying his way $250,000 saved to give it to Tony. But he ultimately decided Vito had to go because, again, his crew was looking at him as weak. So Christopher, Tony Blundetto, and now, Tony's not making decisions as captains feel, or misguided ones. So he wanted to placate Phil Leotardo by taking out Vito. Phil Leotardo was incensed by Vito's sexuality. And later on, you find out from David Chase that it was a possibility that Phil Leotardo was gay. Phil got to Vito first, broke into the hotel room and watched Dominic Fat, Gamiello, and Jerry Torsiano beat his cousin to death and shove a pool cue up his rectum. Tony realized that Phil was sending a message that New York can do whatever they want. So he decided to hurt Phil financially as a payback to Vito. It's one of his guys. So Tony reasoned that a war with New York would prevent this family from earning. But when Fat Dom went to Satriale's on a delivery stop and made jokes about Vito's death and implied that Carlo was a homosexual, which he knew he wasn't, but he's breaking balls, Silvio and Carlo killed him. So that complicated things for Tony. Now, Tony's response to Vito's murder was to blow up a wire room, which was held by Phil in Sheepshead Bay. That wire room was actually Fresh Pond Road, not far from me, right near a bar, Glenlow. So Benny Fazio was on the scene for the explosion. Now, after a sit-down between the Jersey and New York families, a truce was nearly reached before Little Carmine references the death of Billy Leotardo, and Phil Leotardo stormed out. So at a conference with Jerry, Albie, and Butch, a decision was reached to take out a high-ranking member of the Soprano family. Butch was very vocal in his desire to kill Tony. But Phil had more sense than that. He decided against it. He didn't believe that the boss should be taken out. And in fact, I think Butch said something. It happened with Castellano, and he said, and it was wrong then. So Philly was old world still. But he suffers a massive coronary. And soon afterwards, FBI Harris informs Tony that someone in the crew could be in danger. They had a wiretap. Now, in an attempt to clear the air, Tony paid a visit to Phil's hospital bed, telling him that his own near-death experience really shook him up, and, there's enough for all of us. In November 2007, during a disagreement with Phil about an asbestos removal project, Tony reminds him of the discussion they had in the hospital. He thought it was okay, but Phil snubs him. Tony retaliates by taking 2 members of Phil's crew off a project payroll, which one of them actually threatened and harassed Meadow in Little Italy when she was on a date. Tony retaliates by putting his jaw against the sidewalk and smashes all his teeth, almost kills him. Phil won't meet Tony after the incident, and it looks like a war is imminent. So now in 2007, the New Jersey War, the next season really, becomes clear that there's no compromise. The wheels begin to move. New York convinces a Soprano soldier, Bert Gervasi, to switch sides, and he approaches Silvio Dante to join in the coup to kill Tony. But it doesn't work. Silvio, although he was told, you'll take over the family, he betrays Gervasi and strangles him to death in his home. He comes there pretty much to say, okay, I'm with you, and then kills him. Tony knew what had to be done. He arranged for Phil to be executed. Now, at the same time, Phil's underboss, Butch DeConcini, had a war room, and he was discussing with his crew where he arranged the leadership of the Soprano family to be wiped out. Phil had put contracts on Tony, Silvio, and Bobby. Tony's brother-in-law now is the new elevated underboss who replaced Paulie Gutierrez when he stepped down due to prostate cancer. Paulie stepped down to take it easy. Bobby takes it over. We never knew that. I read that. So the hit on Phil went awry when someone that looked like him was mistaken for him and they were killed, an Iranian guy and his mistress. So the hits on New Jersey go much better. Bobby's killed at a model train shop when the two assassins ambush him. Evidently, they didn't hear the word that there was supposed to be a truce. Word comes down that Leotardo was vanished, and the Soprano family decides to do the same. Patsy, Parisi, and Dante attempt to go on the lam, but they're ambushed right outside the Bada Bing. In the carnage, Silvio Dante shot multiple times when he's trying to go to the back to his briefcase to get a gun, which is interesting considering if you know there's a war going on, why would it be in the back of your briefcase? Parisi manages to escape, running off and across the street or something. Silvio is left in a coma. Tony and some of his soldiers head to a safe house to hide, and they continue the search for Phil. Tony actually sleeps with an AR-10 rifle in his arms, which was given to him by Bobby as a birthday gift, his 47th birthday. So Tony comes out of hiding after Bobby's funeral and arranges a sit down with Butchie, Albie, through a little Carmine, and retired boss of one of the five families, George Pagliari. Evidently, he's a retired boss, older guy. Now, during this meeting, the Lupatazzi family agrees that Phil Leotardo's decision to go to war with the Sopranos was a bad one, and he'd gone too far killing Bobby, and they would back off. They're not going to tell you where he is. You do what you got to do with him, but we're not going to tell you where he is. So Tony also demands that they give him a location, but they just won't do it. Butch just wouldn't do it. He's an old-time guy. But he was willing to give a payment to the sister because of Bobby Baccalari. You know, he's her husband, Tony's sister. She probably got $500,000 or $1 million. Now, Butch refused to do anything else. But now Tony had given FBI agent Dwight Harris information on two Pakistani men a while back that had been hanging around the Bing, maybe terrorists. And he eventually told Tony and Phil that he was seen making a phone call from Long Island. So evidently the feds knew where Phil Leotardo was. And he was seen. They had to be looking for him. So they start patrolling gas stations. And they find him. Walden Bellafiore, a Soprano soldier, caught up with him. The hit was very sloppy. Phil was shot in the head and in the chest in front of his wife and his granddaughters, which isn't too cool. His head was crushed by the SUV that was not in park. Now, unlike other informants, we see Carlo Gervasi has disappeared. And it's later revealed that he flipped after his son was arrested for selling ecstasy. And also mad at Tony for his recent behavior as boss. Tony had gone out of the chalk lines a bit. Now, due to his large information on business and construction and the Newark ports, and the murders that Tony probably ordered to do in the past, which Gervasi probably did, and that there may be payback because the five families might want payback for Phil being whacked in front of his family, which is a no-no. I think that Carlo feels this thing's over. Soprano, Tony's in a bad situation. The only way's out of death or prison. And that's how it ends. When someone goes into the bathroom, a la The Godfather, when Michael comes out. So it is really. Oh, thank you, Ira. Hey, Lee. So it's a series where it became, to me, must watch TV after the fifth episode. Water cooler TV. People went there on Mondays at their job, and you see what happened last night? It was a series that really set the tone. The Wire, a lot of shows followed this. You could do much more on cable TV. Osada, the godfather of chocolate. That's not a bad godfather to be. I want you to know this coffee, you know those Lindor white truffle balls? That's in here before I make the coffee. And B&B, about this much. And then half and half in coffee. Great. Drink it down like cough medicine. So this, now I always thought that there were a couple of faults in this show. One being the pilot episode. Silvio supposedly, what are you doing here? Supposedly there all the time. And remember your friend Artie Bucco? How could you not know Artie Bucco? It's the hottest Italian restaurant. You all go there. That was a mistake. Bobby Bacala had to know about Junior's plan to kill Tony. Tony hates Bobby Bacala in the beginning. They're making fun of him. He's supposed to be very stupid. Quasimodo, he talks about instead of Nostradamus. But meanwhile, he becomes Tony's underboss. So he got that smart in 6 years? I doubt it. Michael Corleone killed his brother Fredo. Not saying that's right. There is no possible way Tony would have let Junior live. No possible way. His captains would have, first of all, thought that they were at risk. Tony was a new boss at the time. If you remember, the first season, really, Tony is very friendly with his crew. You notice that? Tony's not the same guy. Like Michael Corleone went to Italy and returned. You didn't see Michael Corleone return. That was an AI version. He never smiled again. His eyes were distant after Sonny and Apollonia died. Well, Tony is a different guy too. Now he kind of yells at the guys under his command. And I think it hurt him that Junior tried to kill him. And I have to tell you, even if he played ball with you and took you to ball games and your father was in jail, that's not enough to keep him alive when he tries to kill you. Especially when Tony tried to kill his mother. So Tony was going to kill his mother, smother her. But he wouldn't kill his uncle? Doesn't make sense. Especially that he felt that the old man got played. So why would you think he can't get played again? If a demented mom can play this guy. And then he had to know, first of all, there's no way that Larry Barisi's brother, who is in prison, there's no way he didn't get back to Tony, that Richie Aprile was looking to take him out. There's no way he wouldn't know that Junior was at the very least an ear for him. And soon as he says, you know, if it wasn't for me, your kids would not have a father around and your wife would be a widow, because Richie went to try to get the captain's ears. Tony would have known, well, what happens if he would have got them? You tried to kill me once. And for that, he got a raise up in the small pittance that Tony was allowing him on a subservient level to earn. Yeah, I figured. Well, you're going to see his career's probably over. Uh, I would think skiing Tidwell probably. So the other guy's not ready yet. So, or they might make Jose Budo starter again. He's started before. So, I think that there are some things here. Bobby Bacala would have never been named on the bus. Never. But, yeah, Sprout's not ready. I do think, though, that the reason why he made Bobby underboss, he saw how loyal he was to Junior. Junior's really not around anymore. Bobby wasn't the kind of guy that would set you up with New York. So I think he felt it was safe. I think he also felt that he was going to get whacked. Or not whacked, I'm sorry. I think he also thought he was ready for a prison sentence. And he needed someone that would definitely take care of Carmel and the kids. I think he thought that Bobby was loyal where they would be taken care of. He's a good family guy. And I think that that's why it was. I think he knew he couldn't trust anybody anymore. It would have been Chrissy. He probably would have handed the reins to Chrissy, which he wanted to do. There's no way either that he couldn't have known that Paulie was working two sides of the fence. There's no way. Things get out there. People talk. There was no way that no one would have saw Paulie meeting with Johnny Sack. If you remember during a backyard party when Tony turned a real jaundiced eye when Johnny Sack was talking to Ralph Cifaretto. Johnny Sack had just moved to Jersey, full-time residence. And Tony said, "What did you move here for?" And then he said, "Well, I have the summer house out in," yeah, well, I know you don't have a summer house on Mulberry Street, but you don't have to live here. I think just that he didn't trust that, why would he trust Paulie cozying up? And there's no way he wouldn't have heard that. Bad news goes through the ranks very quickly. Just like the rumor with Adriana doing something with Chrissy's wife, girlfriend. So that would be talked about. Someone would see Paulie with Johnny Sack. Or at the very least, Paulie Giamatti, who was his nephew, which wasn't really his nephew because they found out that, or cousin, they found out that that wasn't really Paulie's wife, mother. His real mother was a nun, and his aunt took over the responsibilities and made believe she was the mother. So that Paulie Giamatti really wasn't related to him. But I just think his creative license and characters become fan favorites real fast. And you have to remember also, I remember talking to Terrence Winter, who was an assistant. I met him with Gretchen Mall, my friend, on the set of Boardwalk Empire, because he was the EP on that. And he had told me David Chase had to remember every 3 episodes or so to have Tony be a real prick, because he became a hero. People started liking him. And David had to remember to make him do something outlandish where people say, "Oh," because Terrence said, "Tony's not supposed to be the good guy here. He's not a good guy." And people started liking him. You could also see, Terrence Winter also told me, Gandolfini they were off about 16 months at one point. And Gandolfini had lost like 35 pounds. And when he came back, they said, no, no, no. They wanted Tony big, glutton, has everything he wants, a glutton. They didn't want him to seem under control toward the later seasons. Also funny, Sharippa and Gandolfini, about a week before filming, would walk around Mulberry Street, go see Johnny Cha Cha, who was a friend of mine. Cha Cha played the consigliere for Phil Leotardo. I used to go visit him. A good guy. He passed away about 7 years ago, but he was a real good guy, and he was into boxing. He promoter. He did everything. He really did. And I could tell you a funny story of how Vinnie Curatulo got the role. I'll show you the picture if I can find it. But Vincent Curatulo was very interesting how he got his role. I used to see him down with Vinny Bella. My friend owns Ferraras. Well, here was me with Buscemi on the, if you could see it, Boardwalk Empire. That was on the set. Spader came down. Spader was at Ferraras. And I had the picture here. But anyway, Johnny Cha Cha, everybody knew him. It was across the street from Ferraras. And how Vinnie Curatulo, his father was a mason. Oh, here he is. Here's Johnny Cha Cha and me. That's at his place. Vinnie Curatulo had done some high school productions and college productions. Hey, Jeff, how are you? Oh, okay, Jeff, I'll call you after this. So what happened was Vinnie Curatulo, for like his 38th birthday or something, his wife gets him 6 acting lessons. Michael Moriarty lived in the high rise across from the Russian tea room. He used to do it out of his living room around 1997, I think it was. Takes lessons. He liked it. Moriarty said there's a new story that's being worked on, a treatment, and you'd be great. Now, Vinnie Curatulo worked for his father, and they did Carmine. They did Carlo Gambino when he lived off Ocean Park, where he did his cement and everything. So he knew him. So he comes late for the reading for Johnny Sack, and he said, "Don't worry, more people tomorrow are going to read." He's the last one because he was late the day before. He hears like 25 guys reading it like a Joe Pesci. Curatulo, because he's sitting right outside, you could hear the lines, same lines he had. He says, "You know what? They're all doing the same thing. I'm going to be like Carlo. I'm going to go in very quiet, pragmatic." That's how he got the role. Very nice guy. It's a Curatulo. Still was a house on 18th Avenue. He lived right near Vincent Gardenia. Gardenia lived off 18th Avenue. A friend of mine used to serve Gardenia in the 80s, said he was the cheapest guy in the world. If you had to give him 2 pennies, he'd make you go in the back and break a roll of pennies. He lived with his mother, Gardenia. So, yeah, The Sopranos, I think Christopher had flipped. He was wearing that hat, the same as Blackjack Mazzarone did in the diner when they found that he was a rat. He's wearing the Cleaver hat. I think he was a rat, Christopher. I think he put the music up high because he was conflicted. Wasn't sure yet what he wanted them to hear. But I think he flipped. Tony was going down either way. Tony would have to look over his shoulder metaphorically no matter what. So, The Sopranos, an amazing series. One of a kind. It was a leading edge show that captured. Was it true to form? Yeah, took liberties, but it's the movies. It's theater. The thing about there were a couple of episodes that were like a movie, like when they went and uh, he finds Febby Petrullo, the informant who he kills, Garrett's right. That could have been a movie. You had so much in that. You had Carmela with the priest fighting her feelings, the priest having to vomit from too much food and wine. He didn't feel well just about when they were supposed to kiss. He gives her communion and they zoom right into her mouth when she opened. There was a lot there. She finds out in that episode that Melfi is a woman that Tony neglected to say after he comes back and says, "Oh, I heard the priest slept over the house." Well, yeah, Melfi called. I didn't know she was a woman, so now he can't argue about that. A lot. And there were some episodes. The dream sequences, I think they went a little far, but they were one. They were one and the same. I thought they were very well done, but there's only so much. There was one episode I remember you didn't even know it was a dream sequence for a little while, but you saw when Tony went to the Waldorf that he knew Tony Blundetto was the one that killed Leotardo's brother. He didn't want to face it, but he knew. Just like the fever dream when he knew that Big Pussy was the rat, even though for all intents and purposes everybody thought it was Jimmy Altieri. But Tony had changed. Look, Tony was sick to have to kill Big Pussy. Meanwhile, arguably, he loved his cousin more. And when he killed Christopher, he's actually asking people, "Are you a little relieved that he's dead?" He had no remorse. If that was 6, 7 years ago, right? He couldn't kill Junior, Tony. Tony had changed. His soul was dark, black. He was a fun-loving guy the first few episodes. Changed a little when he almost got killed because he realized, no, this is the big leagues now. I'm a boss. And I think he was disappointed. But I do think Junior loved him. I think Junior was able to separate business and family. There's no doubt in my mind that Junior loved Tony. He was vomiting with the hit. Remember outside the car? It's much more than Tony did when he killed Christopher. In fact, he went on a gambling streak. Probably won about 300,000, and because he paid Hesh back, and he screwed his girlfriend for good measure. Yes, Ira, it was, but I think Chris had flipped. If you look at the Soprano family, a lot of guys flipped. You had 3 guys that almost tried to set Tony up, Paulie being one of them. You had guys flipping all over the place in that family. So really, was Tony's reign a good one? Not really. Jackie Aprile, there was peace while he ran things. It's funny, though. Junior didn't make a move on Jackie Aprile, but he made a move on his own nephew he was going to go to war with for taking over the family. Why didn't he with Jackie Aprile? Because DeMeo placed him there. DeMeo, though, you would think DeMeo would have to okay Tony. And ultimately, he had to okay Junior. DeMeo wasn't dead. It probably would have been Feach Lamana if Lamana wasn't in prison. Feach Lamana would have been the guy that would have taken over. Because he was feared. And interestingly enough, when Junior says when Richie Aprile goes to get, he was never respected. This was one of the toughest guys who supposedly was a terror when he was young, and everybody respected him. So I never understood that. Um, when Bobby Bacala had to go to Canada to hit somebody, was that payback for beating Tony Soprano in the fight? Probably. I would think. And Bobby's shirt is ripped, if you remember. And you would think there'd be DNA. No one ever talked about that. His shirt was ripped when that guy was in the stall. You would think there'd be DNA of Bobby. So he left a lot of open-ended questions. But Chase has said on multiple occasions that life, there aren't always answers. Like Pine Barrens when the Russian gets away or if he gets away. Sometimes there aren't answers. You go out with a girl on a Saturday night, she loves you. She never wants to go out with you again. You would have swore to your friends that she wants to marry you. What happened? People wake up the next day and feel different. In that life, you can't afford to. Because it's not that a girl's not going to go back out with you. You'll be dead. Anyway, I'm thinking of doing another show at 11:30. Maybe just a general hangout show. Just look for it. I'll see if I'm going to do it. Jeff, call me now. Everybody, take care. Hope to see you at 10:30. 11:30. See? Got to get my time straight.